Hey, so as the title of the video says, it doesn't matter what the Fed does from this point onward, the unemployment rate will keep rising and the rate cuts will not have any effect, any true effect on the economy for, again, it's the same thing as with the rate hikes. It's probably going to be 2 years. So the first rate cut is coming in September, according to all of these people. And if we just go back and look at history and we make some comparisons, okay? Here's the Fed funds history. You can see when they were hiking rates here, in 2005, 2006. Well, I guess from June 2004 until June 2006, they went from 1% plus 25 basis points up to 1.25, and then they ended it at 5.25, right? Today, we're sitting at 5.25 to 5.5%. So let's say it's the exact same, right? As far as the terminal rate goes. You can see the last rate hike here was in June of 2006, right? This most recent one was in July of last year, 2023. So before they started cutting, how long did it take? It took from June 2006 until September 2007. So about 15 months, right, for them to start cutting interest rates, the Fed funds rate. And as you can see, during the global financial crisis, they were aggressively cutting and nothing helped. The unemployment rate kept rising. Right here you can see in orange, when they were cutting interest rates here in orange, the unemployment rate kept rising. Even as they hit zero. They hit zero right here. Okay? You can see the unemployment rate kept rising. So let's draw a zone and see how effective this rate cutting cycle historically is. Every single time they drop interest rates. Okay? Well, here it was a spike, so we can't even really compare this one, but we're gonna do it anyways. And then we're gonna have this here. They're gonna start cutting in September. There's pretty much a 100% certainty. So they're gonna start cutting here, and they're probably gonna be cutting for about 12 months or so. And the unemployment rate is gonna rise, right? If we go back and look at this one before the dot-com bubble, they started cutting here. And as they were cutting, the unemployment rate kept rising throughout that period. You might say right here that then they cut the interest rates here and the unemployment rate didn't rise. There was no recession in the mid 1990s. That's true. But the yield curve was not inverted at that point. Let's look at the previous example. Here they start cutting interest rates. And during that whole period, the unemployment rate in blue also rises. Right here, there was also a point where they were cutting interest rates and the unemployment rate in blue did not go up. Why? Because the yield curve had not been inverted. So keep in mind, that's another like bonus for the yield curve, right? And then same thing right here. They're cutting interest rates, and you can see in blue, the unemployment rate just rises. And the same thing right here. They're cutting interest rates, and the unemployment rate is rising, right? And so on. We have it all over the chart, right? But the point I'm trying to make is that interest rate cuts are not bullish, and it's quite simple. Why? Why are rate cuts? Why are rate cuts not bullish? Because it's not about it being cheaper to borrow money. It's about risk and reward for the banks. The banks will not lend into a risky environment. And even if they do, right? This is what you need to keep in mind. Even if that happens, there is a lag effect in regards to how quickly that actually, in regards to how fast that starts to help the economy out. Okay? So it's quite simple in all of these examples that it doesn't matter what they do, the unemployment rate will keep rising. Right? They're too late. It doesn't matter if they come in with QE. Let me remind you that they began QE1, quantitative easing 1, in November 2008, and the market fell another 25%. They began it in on March 15th, 2020, and the stock market also fell another 20% from when they began QE, even in those examples. And they were doing lots of bailouts throughout all of '08. They're way too late. And the unemployment rate is rising, as we can see here, and it's not going to stop. This is going to keep going up, right? It's going to be more like this. This is probably what the unemployment rate will look like, okay? When will it peak? I don't know. What number will it peak at? I don't know. Probably 10 to 15% by mid to late 2026. Because normally it rises for 2 years after they start cutting, right? So if you go back and look at this, they waited here for 15 months before they started cutting interest rates. And they started cutting interest rates September 18th, 2007. When are they going to cut interest rates this cycle? September 18th, 2024. Okay, so we have a perfect reference point here. The terminal rate is the exact same as it was back then, before the rate cutting cycle began. And it starts from the exact same month, exact same date. So if we go based off of the 2008 cycle, we would be right here, right? And this is what we're about to experience. Do they look similar? Did the unemployment rate start to creep up here? Yes. Has it started to creep up here? Yes. Are they going to cut interest rates here in September? Yes. Is the unemployment rate going to continue going up? Yeah, I don't see why not, right? The problem is that we have a money supply contraction this business cycle as well. And Steve Hanke, he's a professor at Johns Hopkins University, says that based off his research, right? I think he's looked at about 40 to 50 different countries with different business cycles, and when inflation starts to go up, and then when they start to hike rates, and how long it normally takes for change in the money supply to have an effect on the real economy. And it takes about 20 months, 18 to 22 months, but the average is around 20 months. So the money supply started to contract when? It started to contract in December of 2022. Where is 20 months out from December of 2022? It's right about now. It's in September to be exact. But does that make sense? Yeah, because it's going to be a rate cuts. There's going to be a rate cut in September of this year, right? Keep in mind, this time they raised interest way quicker as well. And also, if we just put this on log scale, and you look at this, uh, right here, no, not that one. Look at the change here in regards to how steep this is compared to what we saw before 2008. Okay, if you put this on logarithmic, this is way bigger of a move than this right here, and it happened way quicker too. All right, so to go back to the money supply, and we use Steve Hanke's research to guide us as to what could happen in the future. December 2022, 20 months out, September 2024. Well, it would be August, September, around there. If you think about this, are we seeing deflation already? Yes, we are. When are we going to feel the impact of this right here? The 4.5% contraction in money supply in April of 2023. If we use the same logic 20 months out, probably by December of this year. Okay, so we should see deflation year over year by December of this year based off the lag effects in the money supply. And the unemployment rate will keep rising. So what's going to happen is that the orange line is going to look like this. I don't know if they're going to cut back to zero again. They might. They might not. They normally cut about 500 basis points. So that's going to go down. and then the unemployment rate in blue is going to go up throughout this period, like that. This is what the business cycle will look like. It's quite obvious. And we have a perfect reference point just because they did a interest rate cut in September of '07. The market peaked 3 weeks later in mid-October, early to mid-October. I think it was the first or early second week of October 2007. And the market rolls over during the rate cuts. So as they're cutting rates from 5% down to, well, 5.25%, because that was the terminal rate for the GFC, down to zero, the markets go down 50%. And then they go down even more after, because the markets did not bottom here. They bottomed in March 2009. And the unemployment rate peaked in October 2009. As you can see right here, October 2009. So from May 2007, right there, till October 2009, the unemployment rate was rising. Now, let me remind you that, I don't know why this one changed color again. Let me remind you that the unemployment rate probably goes way higher this business cycle just because we had inflation to deal with. And to get the inflation rate down 2%, the unemployment rate needs to rise 3.6%, but with a lag. If we're heading into deflation and we're going from that 9.1% reading down to deflation, we could be talking about 15 to 20% unemployment rate as in a Great Depression. And before you say that's impossible, we have not had a money supply contraction since the Great Depression. The bubble is just as absurd. Market cap to GDP, the Warren Buffett indicator, is at the highest level in history. The stock market has never been this expensive. It's very well possible. And it can happen very quickly. So just keep in mind how dangerous this is. The rate cutting cycle and why it's not bullish, because the banks only care about risk and reward. They're not going to lend into a risky environment. Okay? And even if they start cutting interest rates, which they're going to in September, I'm sure, it's not going to have an immediate impact on the market. It will take about 2 years from the point of the cutting. Because from the first rate cut until the unemployment rate peaked, it took until October 2008. No, 2009. The market bottomed in March 2009, and some stocks bottomed around when the VIX spiked in September, October 2008. So based off of this and all the comparisons, when could the potential insane buying opportunity be in the stock market? Well, for equities and or crypto, whatever you want to buy, risk assets. It took about 13 months from the first rate cut for the opportunity to arise. So we could use the same logic and say maybe October 2025, but it's not going to be the exact same. I would say by the end of 2025, we're probably looking at a very, very good buying opportunity in the stock market based on all of this data, right? These are historical averages. This is what happened last time. We have a near perfect, identical uh, comparison as far as the Fed funds rate and what happened and so on, right? And now how could the unemployment rate go? Again, my guess is unemployment rate likely peaks in mid to late 2026 at 10 to 15%. If it's a Great Depression, can't rule it out due to the money supply contraction and the size of the bubble, then we could be looking at 20 to 25% unemployment rate. Keep in mind, the unemployment rate here got up to 10.8% in the 1982 recession. 1982 recession, let's talk about 1929. Great Depression, the Great Depression equals 24.9% on rate. In 1982, 10.8% on rate, unemployment rate that is. 2008, well, GFC, 10% on rate. COVID, 14.7% on rate. This business cycle likely ends at 10 to 15% on rate, but it could go to 20 to 25% if it's bad enough. I just don't think it can be as bad as 1929. I don't think that's possible. Because back then they were passively just letting everything play out and they didn't intervene. They were not stimulating the money supply or anything. Um, but yeah, this is what I think is going to happen. And the yield curve has already been starting to re-steepen through a bull steepener. Let me remind you what that means. A bull steepener is when the front end of the yield curve, as in short-term interest rates, decline faster than long-term interest rates, normally due to some type of crisis. And that's when the Fed is going to be cutting rates. A bear, and it's called bull steepener because it's bullish for bonds, it's bearish for the economy and the stock market. A bear steepener is very good for the stock market and the economy because it means there's the growth in inflationary expectations, whereas it's bearish for bond prices. Okay, hence the name bear steepener. We are seeing a bull steepener. Okay, so not good signs. And if we use this cycle as a guide, because they are pretty much perfect, the terminal rate is the same, the beginning of the rate cutting cycle is about to be the same, then the disaster is probably over by, at the very latest, mid 2026. So 2 years from now, we're probably done. The worst is probably behind us, and we're going into economic expansion again. But that means that the next year or two is going to be very disgusting, and again, economic contraction, deflation, and December of this year we should see the consequences from this, based off Steve Hankey's 20-month lag in regards to the money supply having a effect on the real economy. So what you're feeling today in the economy is what happened with the money supply 20 months ago. That's a direct quote from Steve Hanke. He's a professor at one of the best universities in the world. Okay? Keep in mind, the yield curve has never been inverted this much for this long since the Great Depression either. So like there are so many comparisons here, and it likely won't end well. Um, I think the unemployment rate will. It's unfortunate that this is the way everything is designed, but the way our monetary system is designed. But people are gonna have to lose their jobs in the process of this, right? No one under the age of 35 has experienced bad times. They don't know what it's like. There's recency bias. This is data, right? It's not my opinion. This is what happens every single time. So we can sit here and talk about how it won't be so bad, but based on what? Show me a chart. I don't really care about your opinion. What matters is show me a chart. Present evidence as to why you think it will be a specific way. And the reason why I don't think we can have another inflation spike until the central planners get involved again is simply because if you think about it, the money supply was expanding, like I showed in my last video. It was expanding prior to all of these inflation spikes in the mid 1970s. That's why we got another inflation spike. But the money supply is not expanding right now, it's contracting. So it's completely different. People making comparisons to the 1970s. It's nothing like the 1970s. How is it? It could be if they expand the money supply going into the next crisis, sure. And yeah, there will probably be inflation, but at that point, my base case would be hyperinflation. But we're gonna have a crisis before. Keep in mind, I will not stay bearish forever. I'm only bearish when the yield curve is inverted and when I see these warning signs, a contraction in money supply. Because that right there, that contraction right there, signals a depression is coming, and it will happen very quickly. All right, take care, peace.